Well, you never guess what happened last night. Yesterday, the phone network went completely down. No signal, zero signal. And it's still down. At the same exact time, the internet went down, and it was not just my internet. It was banks, stores, restaurants. So all of a sudden, with no internet, there's no ATMs that are working. With no internet, you can't use your card to get gas. Everybody's taking nothing but cash. But yet, if your gas tank is empty and you're not carrying cash, you're stuck. You're stuck right where you are. Amazing. Trapped. If your gas tank is empty. You can't drive to a nearby town. So I don't know what's going on. I don't know at this point whether I'll talk to my family again over a phone. I don't know what's going on, but these are days that we've been planning for. So I myself, survival, I guess I'm going to survive, but not being able to get hold of family, not having a rendezvous point, not keeping the gas tank topped off. So you can't go to a gas pump and use your card, your gas card, your credit card, your ATM card. You can't go to the local bank and use their ATM. You can't even do a balance inquiry. And to call the bank is impossible because the phone network went down the same time as the internet, and it's completely two different companies. But the outage affected both the internet and a wireless network. And our rule of thumb is to carry a month's worth of salary, in a safe or at home, underneath the mattress, wherever. Just for things like this. For if you were not topped off, and if you, like me, used to not carry a lot of cash on them, just, you lose a $5 bill, you lose, it's not like you can get it back. So it's weird to be carrying cash now. But if you were cashless and your tank was on empty and you were visiting this small town, you're not going home. And to figure out completely and exactly what's going on is virtually impossible. I went down to a local convenience market. Their ATM was down. They're still taking cash. The gas pump doesn't work unless you pay cash. And there's people that don't want to spend, I have $50 in my wallet. Well, if I'm not going to be able to get to a bank for a week or a day, do I want to spend my $50 and be cashless? What a bizarre predicament. And it shows you how a grid failure and a complete power outage isn't necessary to paralyze an entire county or two. And I feel, you know, you can say somebody ran over a cable, but you're talking about an internet provider that has nothing to do with a wireless phone company. Both go down. Coincidence? Who knows? I talked to somebody this morning in the parking lot, said that his wife called him on AT&T because he has an AT&T phone, and AT&T works sometimes. She said it was a county thing, and that if you had enough gas to get 60 miles, you can get to an ATM. You could use your gas card or your credit card to fill up your tank. Well, I mean, round trip, that's 120 miles. That's over a quarter of a tank. What about these fireballs? This is what happened, we think. I mean, when we told you in 2018 that a large object was crossing through the asteroid belt, coming from underneath the solar system, headed north in an inclined orbit, in 2018, 2019, all kinds of weird things happened. In 2018, hundreds and hundreds of coronal mass ejections. They were getting the speed on these things as being ejected at about over 1,000 kilometers a second. Right around there. Well, I mean, that screams electrons and electron jets. And then white auroras started showing up. And some of the most spectacular auroras ever witnessed on planet Earth occurred 2017, 2018, 2019. Just amazing stuff. And the white auroras. And of course, nobody wants to tell you what they are. They'll tell you that they are named Steve. They named white aurora Steve. How disconnected can you be, NASA? Calling a white aurora Steve. I would call it something else. I would call it something much more different. The ellipticality of the other planets showed through all of a sudden. Increased ellipticality, both in supermoons and the position of the lesser planets, Venus, and even Mars. We had the largest single deviation in our magnetic North Pole ever seen on planet Earth. And not just in the same month, but in the same week we were saying that this large object was going to pass, or we were going to pass, in between it and the sun. The closest approach of this object to Earth in 3,600 years. We had fireballs. We had earthquakes. We had deviations in the poles. We had a wobble. We had radiation events. It was ultraviolet C breakthrough. All of this started happening 2017, 2018, and 2019. Now all of this stuff, the fireballs, the comets, they leveled off. But now the fireballs are increasing again. So let me explain what's happening. when some people call it Planet X, Nemesis. We know it's a brown dwarf fragment. I mean, we know what it is. If it was a brown dwarf, all of those cosmic rays and electrons and X-rays would have to be detectable, and they have been. So, boom. What's the quickest and easiest way to deviate our magnetosphere is to bring in a second magnetosphere and have it interact. That's the easiest way. But here we were, telling you 2018, 2019, we are going to have a surge in fireballs. Why? Because we knew this thing crossed the asteroid belt in 2018. It took a full year to come by us in 2019. And December 2019. And all the symptoms were there. The thing that saved our behind was it did not reach maximum perihelion to Earth when it reached perihelion to the Sun. That could have been a game changer. Number two, its relative speed was incredible. The fastest this thing could possibly travel, that's the velocity it was traveling at. Therefore, I mean, think of this. You have a hose that's putting out, a fire hose that's putting out water. The faster you swing it through somebody, the less water they get, and the less powerful the spray. It's because of the relative velocity of the nozzle. Think of a magnet, okay? What happened is we have a lot of iron in the asteroid belt. We have something that was incredibly magnetic. Why? Because it still has a liquid core of helium, but also heavier elements. Lithium, beryllium, oxygen, nitrogen, carbon. And what happens is that as it approaches the asteroid belt from below, it pulls asteroids that are coming towards it down out of the plane of the equator that these things normally want to adhere to. In fact, this inclined object accounts for all the deviations with respect to declinations in the asteroid belt, because the asteroid belt wants to be a belt. It wants deviations and declinations in the dwarf planets, in the Kuiper belt itself, and the Oort cloud especially, such deviations that it's not a cloud anymore, it's more like a sphere, a bubble. And so all of it reflects the declined motion and declined attitude, declined momentum, as well as inclined momentum of an object that's orbiting north and south of the sun, while the stony, icy, iron, silica, rocky planets and the debris field of the asteroid belt want to orbit in a flat disk-like motion. And when this thing comes up and approaches the asteroid belt, it's highly magnetic. It's as magnetic as Jupiter. It's more magnetic than Jupiter. And so it will impact thousands and thousands of asteroids in the asteroid belt. When it reached perihelion, or its closest approach to our sun,
it was at the asteroid belt. That's where the collision happened. That's roughly where cometary orbits, the Jupiter family, hundreds and hundreds of comets, all cross, signaling the origins of all those comets. Why would they all cross at the same point? Different comets, different orbits, coming back to the same point. That's the other big bang. So we knew perihelion was the asteroid belt. It would have to have been, because an inclined orbit, something cannot reach perihelion until it reaches the equator. Usually. So it pulls things south, and when it pulls things south from a southern approach to that debris field, the asteroid belt, it wraps these things around, slings them in all directions, sometimes out of the solar system, sometimes into the solar system, sometimes at the sun, sometimes by the sun. But the majority of the trajectories of the objects that it has come in contact with, iron asteroids, those will wrap around and be ejected back out the other side. So something being pulled south has a high degree of likelihood of being ejected north on the backside in return orbit, on the slingshot. And when this thing punches through and now is north, now the object's it's yanking north out of the asteroid belt, can wrap around and head south, along with, dozens of other trajectories and dozens of other objects. There's going to be some main objects that come out north and south, and those should fragment from time to time. Where do they fragment? They fragmented, oddly enough, at the asteroid belt. So then, on the journey back around and finally settling into their own orbits, new orbits, affected by the sun and the planets, these things are separated by days and following the same flight paths, signaling a fragmentation that wasn't that far out, signaling a fragmentation that happened just in the last few years. Asteroids coming in at a declined or inclined trajectory, traveling in the same corridor. So I believe the comet theory was a whitewash. I believe they just simply can't tell you where and how they knew this stuff was headed our way. It was a nice way of breaking it, what was going on, telling us we could have some major fireball activity, a swarm that you're going to want to not miss. But they've been here, and the numbers have increased, and they're increasing again in concentrations and number. Obviously, a couple large objects fragmented out there, and we're going to pass through that debris field. I expect, if that's the case, then we should see the numbers plateau again. We should pass through this swarm. But, we're in June now. And on the opposite side of the sun is almost Leo, where this thing crossed the asteroid. So this thing crossed the asteroid belt in Leo. We come directly opposite of Leo and the sun in July. So here we are on the completely opposite side of the sun, and we're seeing unscheduled, unprecedented bolide activity. Well, what happened on the other side of the sun? Well, that's where this object punched through the asteroid belt.
Thank you.